G'day everyone and welcome to Administrative Law. My name's Anthony Marinac and I'm your course coordinator for LA 3006. I want you to start this whole course by thinking about the biggest things that control your life. For most of us, the immediate context of our life is our relationships, our families, our work and hobbies, our health, our finances, and these are all things that we have a certain amount of control over. Then there are organisations which are powerful in our society, major corporations, Meta, Apple, Google, Woolworths supplying our food, Coles Myer supplying our food and our clothes, big pharmaceuticals either saving the world or ruining it, depending on your perspective. Again though, we have a certain amount of control over our relationship with those companies. We don't have to buy their products or subscribe to their services. The biggest thing that controls your life is the government. This is the complaint of every tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorist that you've ever seen on social media. The government is out to get us. Now look, I don't agree that the government is some vast malevolent conspiracy, but it is true that governments make rules and decisions which affect basically every aspect of our lives, from the moment our mothers first ask about maternity leave until the moment the law regulates where and when and how our remains can be disposed of. And it can be scary, partly because as citizens, we have essentially no ways in which we can control our relationship with the government. We do have the vote, and the vote is important, but realistically, if the government makes a specific decision that ruins your life, there's honestly not a lot that your vote is going to be able to do in order to change that. Votes work at the mass level, not at the individual level. Your individual vote only matters when it's aggregated with the votes of thousands of others who make the same choice that you do. Even then, a vote is usually pretty meaningless. At an election, if I decide that I agree with the Liberal Party on tax policy, the National Party on energy policy, the Labor Party on employment policy, the Greens on water policy, how do I cast that vote? I can't. I have to vote for one party, and then it's going to be assumed that I support every policy from that party. Votes are a pretty pathetic tool for managing your relationship with the government. At an individual level, we have administrative law. Administrative law says that when the government makes decisions that affect your life, they have to do so in a way that is lawful. They have to do it in a way that follows the rules, observes the evidence, and gives you a chance to have your say. Administrative law gives the individual a way to stand up to the government and have improper decisions changed. In my view, administrative law is fundamental human rights law. When you look around the world at countries that lack fundamental human rights, it's unmistakably clear that they also lack the processes of administrative law. Those in power, those in government, can simply do whatever they please, and the population just has to lump it. So over the next 10 weeks, our underlying purpose is to look at the mechanisms which exist to enable individual people to challenge government decisions about them. We're going to look at what you as a future lawyer will be able to do to assist your clients to challenge poor decision making. Lots of students come to this subject thinking, administrative law, probably something to do with filing. It's much more important, much more powerful than that. So what does the course look like? Well, first and foremost, each week there are these lecture videos. These lecture videos are the primary mechanism for the delivery of the course content. So they should be the centerpiece of your study every week. The questions for the assessments are based on the content of these videos and the content of the cases noted in these videos. Each video will last roughly 10 to 15 minutes. My suggestion is that you start each day of study by watching one video. That way you'll have watched them all multiple times by the end of the term. I suggest that the first time you watch each video, you do it at normal speed. I know a lot of students watch at 1.5 speed to save time, and I have no problem with that. But what you'll find is that you learn better when it seems almost like we're having a conversation at normal speed. After that first time though, when you're just revising, I'm doing my best to make these videos comprehensible at 1.5 speed. In my view, it is crucial that you watch these videos before you do anything else, before you read any cases or attend any classes. During the classes, I will assume that you've watched the videos. The classes are not a replacement for the videos. For the internal students, we then have a 2-hour workshop and a 2-hour synth session. The workshop will begin with a mini lecture, a cut-down recap of the material in the videos. Now, I'll be blunt about the fact that I wish I didn't have to do that. But the reality is that even though the active learning model is superior for student education, many of you are arriving in third year with very limited exposure to it, and there's been regular feedback from students complaining about the absence of traditional lectures. So I'm meeting you halfway. Fair warning though, these are mini lectures. They will not be enough to enable you to pass the course well. They are not a substitute for watching the videos. After the mini lecture, we'll spend the rest of the workshop looking at a series of prepared animations. These animated cartoons are not intended to be especially realistic, but each of them drops you into an administrative law scenario based on the learning for that week. It gives us as a class an opportunity to talk through the scenario and practice using the skills of administrative law to prepare legal solutions. The quality of these sessions depends on the willingness of students to get involved. This is much easier if you are actually physically in the room. It's harder, but still possible, if you're watching remotely, but you have your camera and microphone on when you're participating. It's just about impossible if you're watching remotely and trying to contribute by text. I've had feedback in the past that a few students who are sitting in the room tend to dominate these discussions. And they do. Inevitably, the students who turn up on campus prepared and ready to participate will make the most and the most effective contributions. I will be using an owl so that people can participate remotely, and I will hit the recorder, but this is just a courtesy. Remember, this is a face-to-face workshop for internally enrolled students. If you can't or don't show up, well, that's on you. The recording is not meant to be an effective substitute. So then we come to the synth sessions, which are usually back-to-back, which is pretty hardcore, 4 hours on the trot. The synth sessions are not recorded and the owl will be off. If you're an internal student and you want the benefit of the synth session, you have to show up. I break the synth sessions down into 3 sections. For the first half hour, we're going to do a check-in. This is an informal chance to ask about things that you don't get. We'll check in on the progress of your assessments and that sort of thing. After that, for the middle hour, there will be a group exercise. You'll be given a problem question and divided into groups to work your way through it and come up with a solution, which will then be presented. Now, I know law students traditionally hate group work. Afraid to say though, once you get into a firm, you'll be doing group work all the time. That's how most firms operate. Nobody gets to handle files completely on their own. At least with this group work, there's no marks writing on it. In the final half hour of the synth session, we'll look at one key case for the week. We'll discuss the facts, the reasoning, and the outcome. Personally, I think the synths are worth attending. If you're an external student, we'll have an external class each week which is designed for online participation. We'll start with the mini lecture, we'll look at some animated scenarios, we'll finish by discussing a case. The group work exercises will also be provided to you for you to work on in your own time and in your own way. Now, 2 final things about the learning process. First up, students often ask about the textbook. JCU is moving away from the routine use of textbooks, and this is one subject where I find it difficult to justify asking students to spend the amount of money required on an admin law textbook. so there's no required text for this course. If you want to delve deeper, then I recommend you jump onto Westlaw and look at the administrative law title of Laws of Australia, a database that you should already be very familiar with. Finally, many of you know that I have Australia's largest legal education YouTube channel, Anth's Law School. That includes a playlist currently of 73 administrative law video case notes, and that number will likely grow. Each of those breaks a case down in 400 words or less. They take 2 to 3 minutes each. As you watch the lecture videos, you'll see case names come up on the bottom of the screen relating to whatever I'm talking about. Almost all of those cases have a 2-minute case note. These are no substitute for reading the cases themselves, of course, but they're a heck of a good head start. Okay, so the content. Administrative law, of course, is a priestly 11 subject, so it's one of the 11 areas of prescribed learning that every student must complete if they want to practice law in Australia. It is a public law subject, rather like constitutional law, in that it relates to people's relationship with government, whereas civil law relates to people's relationships with one another, for instance in contract and tort, and criminal law relates to the behaviours demanded by the Crown and the community. In this first week, we'll revise a concept you've met before, the separation of powers, because it really becomes crucial in administrative law. We'll then talk about the nature of administrative decision making. In the second week, we delve back into history and look at how administrative law worked in earlier times, looking at the old school writs of certiorari, mandamus, prohibition, habeas corpus and quo warranto. These are pretty much gone now in most ways, but you can't understand the more recent legislation unless you understand the history. In week 3, we look at what we mean by a reviewable decision, and we look at some government decisions that can't be reviewed. We look at 2 types of review called merits review and legal review and consider the rules for each. And finally, we'll consider 2 broad categories of error called jurisdictional and non-jurisdictional errors of law. On to week 4. Week 4 is probably conceptually the most important week. We look at a thing called natural justice or procedural fairness. This is the idea that everyone is entitled to know the case against them, to respond to that case, and to have an unbiased decision maker. It's the heart of justice. In week 5, we revise the idea of jurisdictional error of law and apply it to the Administrative Decisions Judicial Review Act 1977 to pick out what are known as the narrow ultra vires grounds for review. Ultra vires means beyond the power. So we're looking at situations where government decision makers have done things that they had no power to do. Week 6 is a bit of a monster. We look at all the other grounds for review, what we'll call the broad ultra vires grounds for review. This week has the most videos and the most material. In week 7, we look at the remedies available to a court. If a court agrees that a decision has not been made properly, what can the court actually do about it? Week 8 is when we'll meet the government's brand new Administrative Decisions Tribunal, which in late 2023 replaced the previous Administrative Appeals Tribunal. This is a specialist body, an alternative to the courts for challenging government decisions. In week 9, we look at an individual's right to obtain information from the government, and as the flip side of the same coin, an individual's right to privacy from the government. Information is crucial because how can you challenge a government decision if everything to do with that decision happens within government and behind closed doors? Finally, in week 10, we meet the Ombudsman, the coolest and most unlikely type of public servant you've ever heard of, whose job is simply to stand up for the little folks. So that's the road ahead. Let's get cracking. See you in video 2.